All right, welcome to another edition of our football showcase. I'm going to throw this out there, Corey Geiger, Jason Dombach. This could be our last football game preview of the Penn State season. Now, JD, clearly Penn State has a Week 9 game that they're expecting to play next week against a crossover team from the Big Ten, and maybe that'll happen. Maybe there will be a bowl game. I think that there's a good possibility that this would be it. Play Michigan State, and then, look, I don't know if Week 9 is going to happen. There's so much up in the air. Our team's going to be free of COVID enough to play that it's just running rampant around the league now. So I personally, I think it would be good if this were to be the last game for Penn State, because as I wrote, maybe we can take their ball to let them go home a little bit earlier.
Well, I hope it's not their last game. Let me say that. In your article, you laid out some really interesting points, and it's definitely worth a read if you haven't read it yet. But I hope not. I think this team has won a couple games in a row. They're going to be favored to beat Michigan State. We'll see who the opponent could be next week. Again, a lot of that's going to depend on the availability of any number of teams around the conference to be able to even play next week. But you would hope, for Penn State's sake, and just watching them play the last few weeks, there's a renewed energy. You read the comments that Sean Clifford, for example, said after the game from a player's standpoint. You can tell these guys, they want to keep playing.
Yeah.
And I can guarantee if they beat Michigan State this week, they're going to want to play next week. So let's all hope that does happen. But you're right. There is a very good possibility this could be it.
Yeah, and players always want to play. There's no question. If you're competitive, if you're an athlete, you want to play. I want to get out and play in my yard right now. I got to talk to you. No.
We could play wiffle ball if you'd like. I mean, that'd be pretty competitive.
My son's always coming in because we're doing the homeschool thing. So he's coming in every 10 minutes. Can we go throw the football? Can we go? I'm like, get back on your Zoom call. We'll throw the football later. So, hey, I get it. Everybody wants to play. They're competitive. I would say this, though. With everything that we've seen with COVID around the league, Brent Pry made a good point of this morning, Thursday morning, that he thinks Penn State should get a COVID championship trophy. It says swab on it. I mean, Penn State has done an excellent, excellent job. I did not think they would be playing all of these games. It is, clearly you have to have everybody else do a good job too, and some other programs have had issues. But I commend the job Penn State has done to stay safe and healthy.
Oh, absolutely. A ton of credit. And, my wife being a head coach in the athletic department, I've been keyed into just some of the resources that they have. And obviously medical personnel that are second to none, really. So, hats off to them for that, without question. It's not like Penn State University in general and Center County has not, been hit hard. It certainly has been by COVID. But again, thankfully, they've done a really good job of avoiding it. I think really, and I don't know for sure if they have or haven't had, some isolated situations or cases, but they've certainly dealt with the false positive issue that you have covered and James Franklin talked about. So this has been, I think, a commendable year for Penn State, just to be able to play all their games, do it on schedule, and avoid all of those pitfalls that easily could come up.
Right. And I want to venture into college basketball here for just 1 second. We're going to talk a lot of college football here, but college basketball is really having a lot of issues right now because at the college level, at basketball level, you've got all these schools, these halves up here with all this testing. You got all these lesser, smaller programs that can't do it as much. Mike Krzyzewski went off on a really good discussion a couple of days ago, JD. I'm not sure if you saw it, and I'm not a Duke fan. I'm not a Coach K fan. I think he whines a lot and he bugs me as a college basketball fan. But I watched this 5-minute video and it was great because it was compassion and leadership, and talked about how, hey, maybe we all just need to reassess some of this stuff. So again, I know we're talking football here, but what do you think is going to happen over the next few weeks as we really, Fauci and everybody saying these next few weeks could be the worst that we've seen?
Yeah, and I honestly think they're going to continue on. I think that's going to happen. Look, 88% of programs are still fine, right? It's the 12% that are shut down right now that are really making, the headlines. And again, that could change. these programs are going to get back on the court and others are going to be shut down. So that's going to happen. I would imagine the biggest concern that administrators would have, conference commissioners, because that's really where the decisions are at the moment, not at NCAA level, but really, conference by conference, school by school, is the dynamic of taking these athletes, out of their environment that they're in, where they're being tested all the time, and they're sort of, on campus by themselves at the moment, just with the other members of the basketball program, and sending them home. And who knows what environment that creates. So, maybe that's the right thing to do from a mental health standpoint or other reasons. But I think from the standpoint of the season going on and hoping that it can resume well in January with conference play and then getting to that NCAA tournament in March as the NCAA wants to, I think the best thing right now seems to be just keep playing on, and we'll see what happens. But frankly, I think that's what should happen.
Yeah, that probably is what's going to happen. Let's get back to football. Michigan State this week. Penn State and Michigan State have tried to create a rivalry over the years, play each other in the last regular season game for a long time. The Land Grant Trophy, which brings a smile and a laugh to everybody because it is such a hideous looking trophy. But they've tried to do something here. I think there have been a lot of years where it's been a good matchup and it's been something fun to look forward to. But what do you make of unrivaled Penn State and this notion of, can you create a rivalry with a program?
I think in some fan bases you can with Penn State and probably with Michigan State as well, really any Big Ten school. It's really hard to manufacture rivalries. I mean, I think Penn State and Ohio State clearly have an outstanding rivalry. They're border states. Their games have always been really competitive and high level. We all know that the rivalry, or whatever you want to call it, with Penn State and Ohio State isn't going to match the level of Ohio State and Michigan. But I think, if you're talking about a rivalry, Penn State, Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan, again, always have been good competitive games. This year, of course, a little bit of the anomaly with both programs down. But I think to have a real rivalry, if you're going to manufacture a rivalry that was just created, really in the 90s, it's going to take a generation or so, and you're going to need to have games that really matter. And we haven't had a lot of those with Penn State and Michigan State, and we're not going to get that this week either.
Where do you stand on the Big Ten reversing course and allowing Ohio State into the Big Ten championship game? And we can go about this from two different ways. One, it had to happen for money, but was it the right thing?
I've been wrestling with that, back and forth. I guess where I landed on is, look, when the Big Ten decided that they were going to come back and play, it was very difficult to really see the forest through the trees at that moment, right? So I think the number that they put on it originally at 6 was very arbitrary. And then the number of games and I don't think the math, I know there was the whole thing where if the average number of games fell below, well, then that number would drop. But I'm not so sure that the math, they really had enough time to do all the math on that, right? So I'm okay with it. Frankly, I think it was a good decision. Maybe it would have been a lot different, certainly, if Indiana had beaten Ohio State and then it still worked out where Ohio State maybe was, or they were in a tie situation. That certainly could be a lot different. But I'm okay with the way it all played out.
Right, because the Big Ten could have been embarrassed. I wrote about this. There was at least an outside shot that Penn State could have gotten into the Big Ten championship game by beating Michigan State, because Ohio State didn't play enough games, and who knows if Indiana's going to be able to play next week. But here's what bothers me. This conspiracy theory notion bugs me, that people just think, well, of course they're going to decide that. It's Ohio State. They're going to bend over backwards for Ohio State. And I think that most people in the Big Ten and probably college football probably believe that. Is it true? Maybe. But the perspective to me is interesting. When you're at the top, and you're always at the top, people just take shots at you. They just think that there's always they can't wait for you to fall down. And so my point is this. If Maryland were the number 3 team in the country, number 4 team in the country, and they were awesome, and it was clear that they were the Big Ten's best team, and they'd only played 5 games, I guarantee you the Big Ten would be doing this for Maryland as well, because it's $6 million potentially at stake. If you get a team in the college football playoff, the Big Ten gets $6 million, and that's money that goes to everybody else. Now, look, do they always favor Michigan and Ohio State? Maybe they do, but maybe it's just because, JD, those teams are at the top all the time, and teams that just aren't as good or feel like they're getting stepped on or they're the redheaded stepchild, maybe they're just not as good as Ohio State and Michigan, and they're never in that position to have that benefit of the doubt.
Right. Yeah, and you ask any fan of any fan base, and, somebody's out to screw them, right? It's
Yeah.
TV broadcasters, that announcer doesn't like us, the Big Ten refs, you hear it all.
I don't know anything about what you're talking about, man. That's crazy.
And believe me, Ohio State fans probably feel the exact same way. But look, There's nothing black and white about this year. Just the fact that we've gotten to the point where we've got games on the field, considering where we were at back in August and September, who would have ever thought that? So nothing about this entire process or year has been black or white. I'm glad they made that decision because it really was the right one.
But what do you think of if it were reversed? If it were a Maryland, a Nebraska, because this is what Penn State fans will always say. Well, Penn State never gets the benefits of these calls. The referees, hose Penn State on big calls. Do you think that the league feels like it has to kowtow to Ohio State and Michigan, or is it just that those are the teams that are in those positions more often than not?
I think it's probably your point. Those are the teams that are usually in that position. You kind of, and I'm sure there was some degree of lobbying that took place with Gene Smith and the president at Ohio State. I'm sure, it wasn't a black and white, okay, it was a 5-minute meeting and, let's make this decision. I'm sure there was a lot of discussion in the room, and this wouldn't have gotten through without the support of ADs and presidents as well, right, at the other schools. So, and I think to your point, I think they all see the reason why, not only it's the right thing to do, it was such an arbitrary number that they placed on it back in August and September, or excuse me, when they decided to return to play, whenever that was. I don't even recall at this point. So it was just such an arbitrary number that they had to make that decision with a fresh set of eyes and a fresh set of circumstances. So yeah, I think they would do that no matter who the school is, for sure.
All right. Penn State, Michigan State prediction. Penn State's favored by a couple of touchdowns. Michigan State has looked good a couple of times. They beat Northwestern. They clobbered Michigan. But you think Sparty keeps this close?
I don't think so. I think Penn State's really finding their stride, especially defensively. And Michigan State doesn't really do anything on offense or really have anybody that is going to take the top off of your defense. I'll be watching Connor Hayward because I'm a big Ironhead Hayward fan, his late father, when he was running the football at Pitt back in the late 80s. But other than, and really he hasn't had that great of a year on the ground. So I think Penn State's going to win this game fairly comfortably. I'm going to go 31-10.
All right. I got 34-16. So we're pretty close on all that. Hey, hope you're doing well. I hope we get to do this again. I think there will be a week 9 game, but man, what a crazy season this has been.
It really has. And again, hats off to Penn State. They played the schedule as it lied. How many schools in the Big Ten have done that?
Yeah. 3, I think. I think there's 3.
Right, just a couple. So hats off to them. And it's been great. It's been fun to see them get back on track the last few weeks. Do what they need to do after such a disastrous start. At least, no matter whether they play or not, as long as they win this game this week, I think they'll at least have a little bit of momentum and not as sour a taste in their mouth going into the offseason.
Good stuff. For Jason Dombach, I'm Corey Geiger. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. We'll see you next week, hopefully.